Okay, this is a learning moment for the video games industry. So World of Warcraft had a patch recently called 10.2, and it wrapped up the most recent storyline, Dragonflight. Now, you do not need to be a World of Warcraft fan or even player to understand what I'm going to talk about today. So, if you've never played WoW before and you have no idea what's going on, please feel free to continue watching this video, because the points I'm talking about are evergreen for the rest of the industry as well. Now, the storyline is all about dragons reclaiming their birthright or some bullcrap, but I mainly want to talk about the style and methodology they use to convey the story, and why it falls so flat. I am a firm believer that a good story, or even a good cutscene, is evergreen. You don't need context for you to recognize, hey, this is a good scene happening right here. If you're a Supernatural fan, no matter if you watched the show or not, if I showed you Castiel's debut, you would be able to understand, oh, this is awesome. And if you really care about it, spoilers for Dragonflight and the recent storyline, but I will be showing those cutscenes right here. So you fight the big bad named Farak, who's a fire dragon, and it all builds up to this big climactic moment, where one of the titular heroes, Alexstrasza the Lifebinder, is getting raffle-stomped by Farak. He has this big powerful axe, he breathes fire, he's kind of winning the fight, but he just decides to stop and spout out some dialogue, allowing Alexstrasza to say, "We are not alone." And then all the other heroes from the previous expansions pretty much, and all the characters we've known and sort of come to love for some of them, show up out of thin air via portal and pull off a bootleg Avengers Endgame scene on your left. And then afterwards, all the dragons get their mystical powers back, but not because some ancient deity-esque people bestowed a power unto them, but because the planet itself has decided to gift them a power, because they work together, go team. And the problem with these scenes is that the style of storytelling, one, is uninteresting, for a very specific reason. It's telling, not showing. A lot of games suffer from this crippling flaw, where instead of putting the time in to show you events, to show you characters undergoing emotional change and undergoing development, they elect to just have the characters stand there and convey that and tell you it, which 9 times out of 10 will be inherently less interesting than finding an engaging way and methodology to convey those emotions naturally to the player. But also for a few other reasons, and I actually had to take notes for this one, because there were so many methodologies for this trailer, not even trailer, for this cutscene, that are just lackluster. From bad and cringy camera angles, I agree with Bellula here, where the scene is designed to show off how cool these characters are, not to create a cohesive scene itself. But one of the main issues that I have is the dialogue, and just how much of it there is, and that the dialogue is focused on speaking every thought and subtext, instead of letting you arrive at these conclusions by yourself. It is inherently doubting the intelligence of the player, because they don't believe you are smart enough to be able to pick this stuff up naturally. Or they don't believe they are good enough at conveying these things naturally, so they feel like they have to auditorially say them to make sure that you would pick up on it. And besides spouting out the whole cliche, we're all about family, insert Vin Diesel meme here, and we had to come together to save the world, go team. It is exposition as dialogue, instead of having that exposition come more naturally in an interesting format. When it comes to world building, exposition can be interesting. Just think back to, well, the recent War Within cinematic, where they're able to effectively and concisely convey these thoughts and emotions that the characters are feeling in an interesting format, because they show it. You see it in the animations and the facial expressions of Thrall and Anduin. They don't just have to have these characters standing around telling you how they feel. You can see how they feel. And it's a far more human and effective way to convey what they're trying to convey than what we get in-game. There is some weird disconnect between the cinematics team at Blizzard and the in-game cinematics team for Blizzard as well here. Maybe it's time constraints, or for me, it's just a direction issue. These do not feel like they belong to the same franchise, let alone were put out by the same company in the same year, within a month of each other. And exposition, when done concisely in an interesting location or format, can be handled extremely well. But when you're trying to do exposition for just basic character emotions, they're not conveyed in an effective format, because emotions are more effectively conveyed when you're being, well, expressive, when you're showing those emotions and you allow the player to feel those emotions. If a character is angry or sad or depressed, giving us a reason to feel the same as that character or to understand why they would feel that way is far more effective of a storytelling technique than just the character standing there with a blank expression on their face going, I am sad now. Wow, I am really angry. Oh wow, it was all about family and friendship the entire time. Magical dragon vibes for the win. A lot of the times when it's hard to put your finger on why a specific scene or story is not that interesting, I tend to find a lot of the times it's because they're not expressing these emotions or conveying exposition in an interesting format. And they have an over-reliance on dialogue and cutscenes without properly incorporating that into the gameplay. Now, take a moment to imagine a scene where it's like, we're fighting off against the big bad of the expansion. This giant dragon Farok who has a super-powered fire axe, right? He's trying to burn down the world tree and all of that, right? Very basic concepts that you can follow with minimal context from the game and the actual story. But imagine, during the fight itself, all of a sudden, Farok starts to overpower you more organically. Not just that you beat him in the fight and then afterwards in the cutscene, he starts to overpower you, but you can feel him getting stronger and overpowering you during the gameplay section of it. But then all of a sudden, as you're down and out and you're about to become completely overrun by his power, all of a sudden, maybe slowly, one by one or in like chunks or groups, more and more relevant heroes and characters that have been developed in that storyline and that had an active role there start to come in for reinforcements. Maybe they give you extra abilities and action buttons that you can press so that you are not just reminded that they are there based on the visuals alone, but also you're given a gameplay realization that, hey, your side and you are becoming incredibly stronger now because everyone's working together. You can convey this thought that being together and putting aside your differences is important, because it is, but you can convey that in a far less cringy way in style, do it during the gameplay, and convey these thoughts and emotions in a far more incentivizing and enticing manner. But when you force the player to just sit there and stare at a bunch of characters that look like they're straight out of a Disney movie, talk about friendship is magic as if this is like my Care Bear or whatever, it is fundamentally off-putting, especially in a game called World of Warcraft. Convey it through the gameplay. Don't just stand there and feel the need to articulate every thought and subtext, because that's going to be an inherently uninteresting way to convey that message. It comes off as a bad MCU film or a bad Disney film, because rule of cool, which is important, is thrown out the window, all in service of making sure the player is beaten over the head with very understandable messages that don't need to be conveyed over the course of 3 minutes of dialogue throughout multiple cutscenes. It's just unnecessary fluff that doesn't contribute and detracts from the gravity of the situation. Think back to some of the best moments in video game stories that you have personally experienced. One of my favorite games is Nier Automata. That game shows you a lot and is able to convey a lot of expressions and emotions just through the animations, the voice acting, in concise chunks, in interesting ways that don't ever really stay past their welcome. A competitor to World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, is way better at conveying themes and emotions, hence why that game is so revered for its narrative and its storytelling, because that game, while still operating in the same genre as World of Warcraft, is better able to convey themes and messages, even when sometimes the basic theme and message of we have to work together still rings true, but it's less cringy there because they convey it better. In a more natural environment, they have better dialogue, more concise dialogue, and they utilize game mechanics and the visuals of the fights and just flat out better characters and cutscenes to convey these thoughts in a more concise format and at the age range of their target demographic here. Most World of Warcraft players probably tend to be older. I don't have any evidence to support that, but to me, at least in my experience, most World of Warcraft players tend to, be older, like 25 plus, if that. So having dialogue that feels like it's suited for an under 13 Disney movie feels so wholly disconnected from the target audience of people who actually play this game. It's not just a bad story, it is off-putting. And while I'm sure these scenes were thought up and were on the storyboard before BlizzCon, this does not bode well or instill confidence for the storyline that they have planned for the next 3 expansions. There's a lot of universal properties of good storytelling in my opinion. Your reaction to a story or particular themes and messages is inherently subjective. We don't all like the same thing, naturally, and that's a good thing, because it allows for a more broad spectrum of types of stories that can appeal to different audiences. But generally speaking, the most well-received and beloved narratives are the ones where they understand show don't tell. And this hasn't always been a thing with World of Warcraft. They used to do a far better job at doing this. For the World of Warcraft players, think back to the I am my scars. Think back to that scene from Legion. If Illidan and that freaking Naru were just standing there going, interesting point, Senator, but in my opinion, I believe that the scars of my past do help define who I am in my present self. And that in order to continue walking forward, I have to embrace who I was and use that to become a better person for tomorrow. That drags on, it's cringe-inducing, and it's contrived. Whereas just Illidan saying, I am my scars, conveys all those thoughts and emotions in a far more dynamic and interesting set piece, immediately followed up by a cool action scene of him using his laser eyes. Concision in storytelling is important. Conveying as much thought and emotion in as little time effectively as possible, generally speaking, tells a better story. And showing don't tell is a fundamental principle, in my opinion, of good storytelling. You should rarely ever have to say the emotions that the character is feeling, because the player should be able to see and feel those emotions for themselves. And if not, probably you're not telling a compelling story, or your storytelling is severely lacking. But those are just my thoughts. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, your opinions on good storytelling. What game have you played that has your favorite story and storytelling, and let me know why. What scene really resonated with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And for the World of Warcraft players, what was your favorite storyline or character or moment from World of Warcraft or the Warcraft games? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And let me know when you think the story peaked in Warcraft. Stay safe, have a great day. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.